Hello everybody, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I, of course, am just another heavy metal maniac, and today, as decided by you, the community, in a poll I put up not that long ago, I'm going to be ranking all of the studio albums from none other than legendary Swiss metal band, Celtic Frost. A band that really need no introduction. They are one of the most influential bands in all of metal, and all of extreme metal. They've influenced countless death metal bands, black metal bands, thrash metal bands, even doom metal bands. I know tons of bands like Obituary, Darkthrone, Sepultura have all cited Celtic Frost as an influence. So yeah, their legacy is massive, and they are by far and away one of the most important metal bands to have ever come into existence. They're right up there with like Venom and Motorhead in terms of just how important and influential they were, in my opinion. And yes, we're going to be going over all of Celtic Frost studio albums. We're not including the Emperor's Return EP because that's just an EP. We're also not including any of the Hellhammer stuff because Hellhammer never put out a full-length album. They just had, I think a couple EPs, a couple demos, if I remember correctly. So yeah, they never put out a full-length, so we're not including any of Hellhammer's material. However, as requested by many of you, we are including the two Triptykon albums, which Triptykon is basically kind of the modern incarnation of Celtic Frost in a way. They constantly go out and play Celtic Frost material. And they're kind of a continuation of the sound that was present on Monotheist. So yeah, we decided to include their two studio albums as well. So yeah, without further ado, enough of my ramblings. Let's just get right into the rankings. Coming in at number 8, coming in dead last, it is their 1988 album, Cold Lake. You all probably knew before you even clicked on this video that this album was going to be dead last. This album constantly appears on lists of like worst metal albums ever made, and it's really not hard to see why. This was Celtic Frost's big attempt to go commercial. They were trying to be more accessible, trying to capitalize on the whole glam metal market, and boy, they really screwed the pooch on this one. Honestly, even by like glam metal standards, which I'll admit I'm not really a fan of like glam metal at all, but to me, even by glam metal standards, this is like pretty bad. The production of this album to me is just real off, and I don't like the way this album sounds production-wise. The vocals on this album are really, really bad. Now, I really like Tom Warrior as a vocalist. I think he has a very iconic, unique delivery, and he is an iconic metal vocalist, but he doesn't, I just don't think he has the right range or the right cadences or tone to carry an album like this. Like, he's not a glam metal singer, right? He's supposed to sing dark and evil shit, not songs about being seduced and like going to downtown Hanoi to bang whores or whatever the fuck. The lyrics in this album are just kind of like dumb glam metal tropes, about sucking and fucking pretty much, and yeah, and like none of the riffs, like this is like the most un-Celtic Frost ever sounded in their career, minus maybe the Prototype demo, but thankfully that was just a demo. I wrote down in my notes, like Rat and Dokken. Those are not bands I should be thinking of when I'm listening to a Celtic Frost album, right? Like, I should not be thinking of these American poppy glam metal, hair metal bands. All right, this album is flat out terrible. I really, really don't like this album. I agree that this is probably one of the worst metal albums ever made, like, especially coming from a band like this, a band with such pedigree and influence, to put out an album like this, like other than maybe like Grave New World by Discharge, this album is like the sellout of all sellouts. Yeah, this album is just flat out terrible, and I will never listen to it again. So that's why Cold Lake is dead last, unsurprisingly. So my number 7 choice might catch me some flack, because I know a lot of people really love this album, but my number 7 choice is Into the Pandemonium, released in 1987. Now again, I know a lot of people really, really love this album. I've tried really hard to like this album, like, just over the years, but I just cannot get into this album. This was their departure into much more avant-garde, experimental, kind of progressive territory, and I don't know. This album is it's just such a strange, weird listen, but not strange or weird in a good way, in my opinion. First of all, they open up the song with the cover of Mexican Radio by Wall of Voodoo, which, first of all, like, why would you open your own album with a cover song? Like, that just doesn't make any sense to me. Also, the cover just sucks, in my opinion. I have never really liked their version of Mexican Radio. I've always thought it was just kind of a dumb song. And the rest of this album, there's good riffs on it. There's good moments here and there, but there's usually something along the way that kind of ruins it for me. This is where Tom Gabriel started doing his weird moaned vocals. No, I don't like that at all. It is so damn off-putting. I don't like. I hate the weird moaning vocals. And there's like sections that are like sung in like different languages. There's like classical influences. There's drum machines at one point. I don't know. This is just such a strange, bizarre album. And it just, to me, some of the songs just don't gel together. A lot of it just kind of feels like experimentation for the sake of experimentation, and it just does not land at all for me. Again, I know a lot of people love this album. I know this was kind of like a pretty big landmark release in terms of like developing the genres of avant-garde metal and experimental metal and even maybe progressive metal, you could argue. But I just flat out, I just don't like this album. It's better than Cold Lake, again, this album, it's just weird. Again, if you love it, you love it. But I just cannot get into I just cannot get into this album, which is why for me it lands at number 7. Coming in now at number 6, it is Parastera Daimones. I'm not sure if I said that right, correct me if I'm wrong, but yes, this was the first album by Triptykon, released in 2010. So yeah, this, like I said, Triptykon is kind of pretty much a continuation of the sound Celtic Frost introduced with the album Monotheist, and this album is basically just kind of like Monotheist, but with a heavier, thicker sound, I'd argue. And also, it's just more experimental, more kind of avant-garde. And there are some really good songs on here, in my opinion. Goisha, the opening track, I think is really good. Abyss Within My Soul. I like 1,000 Lives. I also like the song Descendant. I think that's pretty good. The reason this album for me lands at number 6 is just because I don't think it's like poorly written or like it's bad or anything. It's just it doesn't always land for me personally. It doesn't feel like as like just kind of weird or like as Into the Pandemonium, but it kind of approaches that level at some point. Like when you get to like the back half of the record, like the song My Pain just doesn't do anything for me at all. It's just like this weird kind of ambient song with female vocals. I just did not care for that song at all. The song Prolonging, which is the 19-minute like closing epic, I guess. It's not really, I don't know. I feel like that song just kind of drags on for a bit too long. Same with Myocopian Empire, if I'm remembering the title correctly. When they just start kind of like repeating Myocopian Empire and then like just interjecting other lyrics in there, it's just kind of weird. I don't really like that part. So this album does have really good songs on it. It just doesn't always like gel with me personally. So yeah, that's why for me, Parastera Daimones, again, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, correct me if I'm wrong, lands for me at number 6. I think it's a good album. I would return to it. It's just lower on my list. Alright, and coming in at number 5 is Vanity Nemesis, released in 1990. So this was Celtic Frost's final album before they initially broke up and came back with Monotheist, which we'll get to. This album, while it is definitely different, I think it is still good. This album to me kind of feels like what Cold Lake should have been. Like on this album, it feels like they were definitely going for a more kind of accessible, more slightly commercial sound, but they still managed to keep that Celtic Frost feel within their music. Like the songs, for me, it's still very dark, it's still cold, it's still heavy, it's still got that cold, grim atmosphere you associate with Celtic Frost, and it's thrashy, it's got thrash metal riffs on it. Granted, yeah, it's a bit lighter, and it does feel like they are going for a more accessible sound with this album, but I still think they managed to write some absolutely banging songs on here. Wine in My Hand, Filled from the Sun is an amazing song. I love Wings of Solitude. Kiss or a Whisper is one of my favorite Celtic Frost songs, honestly. I really dig that song. And the Nemesis, I like how they kind of bring back the intro that was on Morbid Tales, the human little intro. I think that's cool. They bring it back for that song. And yeah, Nemesis is a really, really good song, too. I like this album. I think this album is underrated. It definitely does get overlooked, which kind of makes sense because this came out like right after what people consider to be this band's worst album, myself included, and it was also like right before they broke up and came back with a different album. So yeah, this album does get lost in the shuffle of Celtic Frost and Triptykon. But yeah, I think this is an underrated album. I do enjoy it. It's not far from my favorite, but number 5, I think Vanity Nemesis is a good album, and I enjoy it. So coming in at number 4 is Melena Kasda, released in 2014. This is currently the final album from Triptykon. Who knows if we're going to get another Triptykon album? I can't say. I like this album quite a bit, actually. This album, to me, feels like an improvement on the previous Triptykon album, whereas with the first Triptykon album, sometimes songs would kind of just meander, and they would just kind of lose me at certain spots, or they kind of drag their feet a little bit. I feel like they kind of fixed that a little bit. I feel like the songs kind of gel a bit more on this album. They kind of gel together better, and they resonate with me more personally. And there are some absolutely banging songs in here. Ball Skin House, I think, is really cool. Altar of Deceit, Aurora, yeah, again, weird song titles. Demon Pact, I like Black Snow. Yeah, I like the production of this album. This album feels a bit more Celtic Frost-ish than the previous Triptykon album. Like, it feels a bit more like they're bringing kind of bringing in a little bit of that old school Celtic Frost vibe. Minor complaint with this album, there are some of the weird moaning vocals in one spot, which, again, I don't like. I don't like the weird moaning vocals that Tom Gabriel does. But they're not there for very long, and it's, again, just a very minor complaint. I do really dig this album. I would happily return to it. Melena Kasda, it's number 4 for me. I think it's pretty damn good. Alright, coming in now at number 3, it is Monotheist, released in 2006. I've mentioned this album a few times already. And yeah, this is, in my mind, one of the all-time great metal comeback albums, and yeah, this is an absolutely awesome album. This album is different than the other kind of Celtic Frost albums that came before. It feels and sounds different, but it's still very much Celtic Frost. The Celtic Frost vibe and spirit is still well and alive within this album. It's very atmospheric, it's very dark and dingy, and there's some absolutely awesome songs in here. I love Progeny. Ground is one of my favorite songs off this album. Dying God, Coming into Human Flesh is one of their more popular songs, I think. I think that song has like over 3 million plays on Spotify, which I think is pretty neat. I Ain Elohim. I'm probably pronouncing all this stuff wrong, but that's a really good song. Synagoga Satane. Again, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but that song fucking whoops ass. Yeah, I love this album, frankly. I think this is, again, like one of the all-time great metal comeback albums. This is like right up there with like Carcass's Surgical Steel and like, you know, whatever great metal, Brave New World, Iron Man. This is like right up there with those albums, in my opinion. This is a absolutely brilliant album. Again, I like it. It's different but still very much Celtic Frost. I like the more kind of focus on the doomy parts. I think that's really cool. Again, I just love the darkness, the creepiness of it, the very just cold atmosphere. Monotheist, this is an absolutely incredible album for me. It is my number 3. So coming in at number 2, it is Morbid Tales, released in 1984. I love this album. Alright, now there's a bit of debate as to whether this is like an EP or a mini album or a full-length album or whatever. If you go by the original like European release, where it's only like a 6-song EP, then yeah, it's technically an EP or like a mini album. I've also read interviews where they say that's like the band's first album, but the version I listen to is the American release, which adds 3 different tracks and technically extends it into a full length. So yeah, Morbid Tales, we're counting it as a full length just for the purposes of this video. But yeah, and with that out of the way, I love this album. This is an absolutely amazing album. This is like one of the all-time greatest debut albums in my opinion. The production of this album is very raw, very gritty and dirty, but also still like sounds good somehow. I don't know. I love the production. I love the guitar tone on this album. It's fucking amazing. There's a bit more like kind of punky energy, like a kind of upfront punk energy, which is not something you get on many of their other releases, which I think that gives this album kind of a cool edge, which Celtic Frost was already good at making sure each of their albums stood apart from one another and giving their own albums these unique flavors. They never really tread the same water twice when it came to full lengths, which I think is pretty damn cool. They may screw the pooch sometimes, Cold Lake, but I think for the most part it worked. And there's some absolutely banging songs on here again. Into the Crypt of Rays, Procreation of the Wicked are 2 classics, obviously. Tons of bands have covered those songs, but I also love Visions of Mortality, Dethroned Emperor, Nocturnal Fear, Return to Eve. Yeah, I love this album. This is an absolutely incredible album, in my opinion. The only thing that really holds this album back from maybe being my number 1 is the track Dance Macabre. It's just stupid, flat out. It's 4 minutes worth of demon noises and like weird chimes and screams. I don't know. I don't get the point of that track. It's just, to me, it's just a stupid, it's just a time waster. It's just filler. It has no reason to be as long as it is, and it frankly just has no reason to be on the album. You cut that out, this is pretty much a perfect album in my opinion. So yeah, Morbid Tales, this is my number 2. I really love this album. I think it's absolutely amazing. And coming in at number 1 is To Megatherion, released in 1985. If you're going to make a list of like 100 metal albums you have to hear before you die, or like 100 essential metal albums, this album has to be on there. There are still so many bands today chasing the sound that this album in particular like pioneered. Just, you know, this is like the perfect Celtic Frost album in my opinion. If someone asked, hey, what does Celtic Frost sound like? I'd probably play the song The Usurper, because that is just a perfect Celtic Frost song. It's thrashy, it's cold, dark, grim, energetic, all the words you associate with Celtic Frost. Everywhere on this album, every single song stands out. Jewel Throne, Eternal Summer, Circle of the Tyrants, Beyond the North Winds, Necromantical Screams. Yeah, obviously you have the amazing artwork done by H.R. Geiger, who I forgot to mention also did the artwork for the 2 Triptykon albums, which I think is really fucking cool. Yeah, but this is one of my favorite artworks in metal. I think this was my number 1 when I did my metal artworks video, so go watch that if you haven't, by the way. Spoilers, but yeah, this is an absolutely amazing album. I love To Megatherion. It's, yeah, one of the all-time greats, like thrash metal albums, first wave black metal albums, proto death metal, whatever the hell you want to call it. This is just a flat-out incredible album. Again, an absolutely essential metal listening for anybody who wants to get the full scope of history, scope and, you know, scale of metal. This is an absolutely essential listen. So yeah, To Megatherion, love this album. This is my kind of clear-cut number 1. I kind of knew it would be my number 1 going into this, but yeah, I love it. It's number 1. And, well, that about does it. If you made it to the end of this video, you are awesome, and I appreciate you. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video. Leave a comment down below. Tell me, do you agree with my rankings? Do you disagree? Let me know. Consider subscribing as well, because I do have a lot more content coming your way, and like I said, that about does it. I, of course, am just another heavy metal maniac. I'll see you all sometime in the future. In the meantime, all of you take care and have a great day. So long.